From moments that just had to be CGI but actually weren't, to absurdly tactile effects that were in fact digitally created, and other nifty tricks that nobody could have ever seen coming. These scenes are all a testament to the incredible artistry behind Hollywood's special effects, and the result in each case is pure movie magic. So I'm Gareth, you are watching What Culture, and here are 10 awesome movie effects that aren't what you think. Number 10, the lunch tray, Spider-Man. One of the most memorable beats in Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man sees Peter Parker not only catching MJ when she slips over in the cafeteria, but also using his spidey sense to catch her entire lunch tray without dropping a single item. What a man. A Spider-Man. Given the film's already CGI-heavy nature, it was easy to presume that Raimi simply had Toby Maguire catch the falling lunch tray and added all the lunch objects digitally in post-production, right? Incredibly, this was actually achieved entirely practically and in camera, with Raimi filming 156 takes over 16 hours before Maguire successfully managed to catch the tray and its contents. In fact, there's only really one aspect of the shot that can even be called a special effect. Sticky glue was applied to Maguire's hand to ensure that the tray stuck to his fingertips, giving him a fighting chance of actually catching all of MJ's food. Now just consider if Kirsten Dunst had forgotten her "wow, great reflexes" line that follows the successful catch. Imagine their faces. Number 9, Rey's Instant Bread, Star Wars The Force Awakens. A brief but unforgettable scene early in The Force Awakens sees Rey preparing a meal of polystarch, an instant bread product which is created by mixing a flour-like powder with water. Within a few seconds, the mixture rises and transforms into a doughy, dry roll of bread. Lovely. Much like Spider-Man, the film is so rife with complex visual effects that nobody really gave the bread a second thought. Why wouldn't J.J. Abrams render something so seemingly simple with CGI? Just felt obvious. But in line with Abrams' commitment to achieving as much of the effects as possible practically, the bread is a 100% physical effect here. Special effects supervisor Chris Corbould stated in interviews that the completed prop took 3 months to design and create, as his team constantly iterated on the look of the bread, while figuring out how to make it rise while the water disappeared. But if you thought that bread was actually edible, sadly not. According to Corbould, it tastes terrible. Lucasfilm did provide fans with a recipe to make their own simpler, edible version of polystarch though, so you too can eat some doughy space bread whenever you like. And if you like yourself some Star Wars, then why not head on over to What Culture Star Wars for more Jedi, Stormtroopers, the Force, and of course, portion bread. We've got it all. What's the most delicious food that you've ever seen in a movie, folks? Let me know in the comments down below. It's gonna be the space bread. If it's not, well, I understand. Number 8, Tumblr vs. Garbage Truck, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight SWAT van chase is one of the film's most distinctive action beats, and you'll probably remember the moment where Batman's tumbler collides with a garbage truck at full speed, easily disabling it. Given Christopher Nolan's penchant for practical effects, there wasn't much reason to believe that he didn't just collide the two vehicles together for real. I mean, it's just what he does. And though the effect was indeed practical, it was actually entirely composed of miniatures. Nolan's effects team built an identical miniature of the tunnel which the chase takes place in, and 1/3 scale motorized models of both the tumbler and the garbage truck, which they duly crashed together. Given how challenging it is to make miniatures match real footage, it is absolutely jaw-dropping how seamlessly the shot blends into the full-scale chase itself. Very impressive. Number 7, the T-1000's Battle Wounds, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. James Cameron's Terminator 2 is a stunning triumph of cutting-edge visual effects, which still looks incredible 30 plus years on. And though the film is well noted for its smart fusion of practical and digital elements, it's safe to say that the various scenes in which the T-1000 sustains battle damage are accepted by most everyone to be entirely digital. Well, unbelievably, a good deal of these shots were entirely practical, thanks to legendary special effects whiz Stan Winston. Winston. When the T-1000's head gets blown apart during the hospital escape, for instance. We are looking at a physical model here, with animatronics used for the head's movement. CGI was only used for the final shot of the T-1000's head fully reforming. Elsewhere, many of the T-1000's liquid metal wounds throughout the film are nothing more than foil squibs glued to Robert Patrick's clothes, with CGI only used to animate the original appearance and disappearance of the wounds. Given how so many modern films struggle to blend practical and digital effects together, it remains mind-boggling just how expertly Cameron and his crew left audiences unsure of what exactly they were seeing. Again, this was all the way back in 1991, over 3 decades ago. It's madness. Number 6, The Floating Pen, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Early on in Stanley Kubrick's sci-fi masterpiece, Dr. Hayward Floyd is being transported in a space shuttle, as the audience is treated to a gorgeous zero-gravity sequence. Memorably, a pen can be seen floating in the air before being retrieved by an air stewardess. But even with the film's eye-wateringly impressive and pioneering use of visual effects, it's fair to say that 1968 was just too early for the production to convincingly create the floating pen digitally, and most viewers likely figured it was executed with hidden wires. The actual effect is hilariously simple though, and all the more genius as a result. Kubrick simply had his crew glue the pen to a large sheet of glass, which would be rotated around to give the impression of it free-floating. Incredibly, Kubrick managed to avoid any telltale reflections, and the only vague giveaway is that Heather Downham, who plays the stewardess, has to ever so slightly unseat the pen from the glue, rather than simply pluck it out of thin air were it really floating. As complex a production as 2001 was, it's staggering that one of its most talked about effects shots was achieved with such inspired simplicity. If you're enjoying this mind-blowing list today, my friend, then why not hit that subscribe button, eh? You'll get even more of the good What Culture stuff. What a life. Number 5, The Magic Bathtub, Mary Poppins Returns. Whatever you made of Mary Poppins Returns, it's practically impossible to forget that gorgeous shot of the magical nanny sliding backwards into a bathtub and disappearing beneath the bubbles. It was featured in all the trailers and did a fantastic job conveying the escapist thrills the film was shooting for. And given the film's pervasive use of CGI, everyone quite understandably believed the effect was digital, because why wouldn't it be? Astoundingly, this was actually pulled off completely in camera, folks, with the effects team ingeniously constructing a bathtub with a secret slide in the bottom, allowing the actors to ride it to a crash mat on the floor below. Wish I got paid to go down a slide. The film as a whole is so awash with lavish visual effects that most viewers didn't even give it a second thought. This had to be CGI, right? And yet it absolutely wasn't. Number 4, Toby Maguires Wig, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Terry Gilliam's mind-bending road movie features an unforgettable cameo from Toby Maguire as a hitchhiker scooped up by Raoul Duke and Dr. Gonzo. For the role, Maguire was required to sport a most unfortunate hairdo, long-haired yet balding. And even watching the movie today, there's no reason not to believe that he's simply wearing a wig. Right, the story behind Maguire's hair here is extremely ridiculous, so prepare yourself. The production forgot to include a stipulation in Maguire's contract requiring him to shave his head for the role, and so the enterprising actor demanded $15,000 to do it. And you miss all the shots you don't take. Gilliam didn't much like being held hostage and so declined, instead fitting Maguire with a bald cap and adding the hair digitally in post-production. With the movie now over 25 years old, it's insane just how difficult, even impossible it is to find the seam between Maguire's bald cap and the CGI hair. Try your best, you will fail. Hilariously though, this effect ended up costing much more than the fee Maguire demanded to shave his head. Was there really no way to just fit a wig over the bald cap? Never change, Terry. Number 3, John McClane's Roof Jump, Die Hard. There are so many iconic action beats in John McTiernan's Die Hard, but who can forget the fantastic moment when John McClane leaps from the roof of the Nakatomi Plaza as it explodes, tethered only to a fire hydrant as he hopes not to fall to his death. As McClane leaps, a cacophonous explosion is set off behind him, which conventional filmmaking logic would dictate was a relatively simple, controlled explosion detonated safely behind Willis, right? Shooting the roof explosion was quite a technical logistical challenge though, as the production had to ensure not to deal any actual explosive damage to the real skyscraper atop which the scene was filmed, California's Fox Plaza. According to McTiernan himself, Willis performed the leap from a piece of custom-built scenery placed away from the edge of the roof, but rather than use conventional prop explosives, his crew had to get creative. The director said, "We built these crazy machines that had a great deal of propane in them, vaporized. On action, they would make a great deal of fire for about a 5-second burst." McTiernan added, "To put the fire behind him in the traditional way would have been an enormous amount of nonsense. Instead, we had these mortars drive around with a forklift, and they would put fire exactly where you wanted it. So now you know." Number 2, Old Cap Avengers Endgame. For all of the many impressive visual effects throughout Avengers Endgame, one of the most evocative surely has to be the aged presence of Captain America in the film's affecting coda sequence. Given that the MCU has cornered the market on digital de-aging effects, most fans quite rightly assumed that the effect had been applied to Evans in reverse, aging him up with CGI. But the end result is ultimately a combination of several techniques. First and foremost, Chris Evans did indeed don extensive old man makeup for the scene, and the raspy Cap voice heard in the film is indeed all him with no post-production touch-ups. Evans' physical appearance was heavily accentuated by CGI though, and veteran character actor Patrick Gorman was hired as a body double to ensure the character's body physically resembled that of an older man. Hilariously, Gorman posted a picture of himself in old Cap's clothing with CGI reference dots on his face before the film even came out. But of course, it flew totally under the radar. The mere fact that this effect had people questioning its execution is all the better testament to how believable the final result truly is. And number 1, A Mouthful of Bees, Candyman. Cult 1992 horror flick Candyman features many disturbing sequences, least not the appearance of the titular urban legend with a mouthful of bees, reflecting the fact that his human self was murdered by a lynch mob, who smeared him with honey and let bees sting him to death. The visual of the late great Tony Todd's mouth full of bees is deeply unsettling, and despite the film's low budget, one assumes there's some sort of optical effect or trickery going on here. The bees clearly weren't CGI, but animatronics perhaps? But shockingly, the bees are 100% real. And to be totally clear, Todd indeed agreed to fill his mouth with bees. The bees were bred specifically for the production, and being just 12 hours old at the time of shooting, their underdeveloped stingers made them decidedly less dangerous to both Todd and co-star Virginia Madsen, who meanwhile had the bees plastered over her face. In fact, the only real special effect in the entire scene was Todd being given a dental dam to put in his mouth, in order to prevent the bees from stinging his throat. Oh boy. Otherwise, it was nothing more than just smearing some pheromone on his face, opening his mouth wide, and then trying to remain calm. For his enthusiasm, though, Todd managed to negotiate an agreement where he'd be paid an extra $1,000 for every sting he suffered. The actor ended up being stung a whopping 23 times, adding quite the well-earned bonus to his paycheck. Good for him.